Hey everybody, my name is Joe. If this is your first time on the channel, I'm a comic artist and creator. I've made the book Star Circuit, which is now on Indiegogo. You can check that out. But today I am a reviewer, and we're going to be reviewing the book Sovereign Wolf. It's written by Eddie Winkler, illustrated by Lucas Mayer, with colors by Giuliano Peritelli, and letters by the great Eric Weathers. So, before we begin, I just want to say that I purposely not watched any reviews or comments on the book. This is going to be just my thoughts and feelings, only informed by my reads of the book and by my background as an artist and storyteller. So, also know I won't be holding back. If you know me, just like the Colonel himself, Zaid Studios, knows, I don't hold back on the criticism if it's there. So, before we begin, just want to let you know that it will contain spoilers. This video also will not address the fulfillment or the campaign for the book. So, lastly, check out the time codes in the description to head right to the summary for all the scoring on the book. So, with everything out of the way, let's begin. So, presentation on Sovereign Wolf is very impressive. The book has got a great weight to it. It's got a high gloss on all the pages and covers, and it's just a beautiful book. The professionalism here is set to a high bar, especially for an indie book. So this book really has a presentation of almost like a blockbuster. This is the blockbuster of comic books. It's sleek, it's bombastic, it's over the top, and the sleek nature of the content, which is very broad, I feel like. It's monsters doing crazy fights, and I think it's a broad appeal like a blockbuster would have. So in the presentation area, I think it matches, everything syncs up, and it's just wrapped up into a nice package, put a nice little bow on it, and this thing is top tier there. So I'm giving this thing an S tier. So in my rating system, S is the top. So this is probably as good as you can get in the presentation area. So the art category, this is my favorite category. This is where everything stems from as far as comic books for me. Without good art, the story does not fly for me. So with Sovereign Wolf, the draftsmanship is very consistent. It's got a reminiscent kind of style to Ivan Reis or Kanan White. It presents a realism that is just unfaltering. So on top of that, we get a good combo with colors that are vibrant by Peritelli, and he creates a mood from scene to scene by varying the color tones, and he creates a emotional roller coaster just with the colors. So that's what I like to see. There's a lot of books out there, a lot of indie books especially, that don't do this, and you kind of like start yourself off with a handicap if you don't use color to create a vibrant and dynamic story just by how it makes you feel. So let's get back to the straight draftsmanship. There's a few issues that I've noticed besides maybe this should have gone into the presentation tier, but some of it seems a little dark. That could be because of the style, but it could be also because of the printing. Potentially because it's not a bright and happy book, they went this route, but I really liked a lot of the consistency throughout the pages of how dark it remained. So for that reason, I'm not faulting it too much. But what I will fault the book for is a little bit of inconsistency as far as the faces. Overall, they stay pretty consistent as far as characters looking like themselves from page to page, but some of the faces are a little wonky. Portraits just get a little confused between... I know how this works because between one artist to the next artist, they render things slightly different. So sometimes that gets out of sync, and you'll have, say, a face that is drawn a particular way, and maybe it could have been saved. Maybe some of the wonkiness could be corrected in the color stage, but it just didn't happen because it's two different creators. So that's kind of the downfall of I guess team-oriented books, but at the same time, overall it's great. I think that the book is worth your time as far as the art and as far as the just the appeal of what it creates, how characters are acting and how the environments are drawn, backgrounds are fully expressed. There's just tons of stuff here that like is worth your time. So I would highly recommend it. This is getting an A tier. It's not a complete knocked out of the park kind of score because of the few errors in maybe some of the draftsmanship and coloring, but still A tier is pretty good. Okay, so let's talk story. Even though my biggest focus for comics is the artwork, I also pride myself on knowing story structure and how that ties to visual storytelling and character development. And it's really what I like to focus on when I review books. This is the biggest, I guess, category because it involves the combination of the artist and the writer. Sometimes they're the same one, same person. But to me, because it's a combo, it's also the biggest category. So Sovereign Wolf's story is overall an enjoyable and a successful intro into the world they're trying to create. It's got especially good pacing. I think when you open the book and you get through the first, we'll say, third of the book, you get a great feeling of its tense and mysterious nature. In this book, we follow John Sovereign. He's a scientist who gets wrapped up in an ongoing war between like shape-shifting clans of, they're both new and old clans, but he gets wrapped up into this kind of war. And it's a suspenseful action adventure book. It gives you this blockbuster kind of pace where it's pretty quick with unexpected turns in the story and plot. And I think it's overall doing its job. So I think the best thing we can say about it is that it's got great pacing. The acting is pretty great for the most part. The action is kind of the premier event, and it actually delivers on what it promises in both the campaign and, you know, just looking at the cover. And at the end of the book, I think it's got a good cliffhanger. Now, let's get to what we can talk about as far as what we can improve upon on this book. And this is kind of where most creators kind of are nervous, because what you can improve is usually the things that are not working great. And the things that I don't see in this book, we'll break down here very quickly, are I think this book is missing a theme. I think the book is telling a lot and not showing as much as it could. I think there's a couple of bad sequences. It's got an odd ploy kind of by the antagonist, and there's a little bit of service level characterization in a couple instances. So let's break that down. We'll start with theme. So theme's a little tricky. Not everybody adds theme into their book. However, theme is really important as far as I'm concerned. Theme in this book is not the biggest issue, but I feel like not having one that's clear and focused really makes this book seem a little more superficial than it could otherwise be. For me, a theme is a unifying focal point. It's an armature that hangs, all of your plot hangs on the armature of theme. As far as I can tell, for the most part, Sovereign Wolf having a theme dives into a little bit of the dangers of technology, ambition, and maybe the artificial dangers of creation. But it's not really expressed too well through the storytelling, so you don't really know. It's a stretch almost for me to consider that that's the theme. But it does have a cool use of minor themes, which is like the Native American tribal motifs, and it's got this naturalistic versus the artificial as far as worldviews go, and if all these were focused on a little bit more, this theme could be interjected in the story a little bit and give further life and meaning to the characters and story beyond just kind of fighting a war because it's good versus bad, or because one side is trying to conquer and the other is trying to free. I guess maybe that could be an additional theme tied to the naturalistic versus artificial. So I think that's my take on theme on the book. Let's move on to dramatizing things in your story, which is essentially my problem of Sovereign Wolf telling us things and not showing us things. And I think this is the biggest problem with Sovereign Wolf. It's something that a lot of books fall into, because comic books tend to be really deep into different subgenres of subgenres, and to get to the base level of let's tell the story, you have to dig into the lore, and there's a lot of exposition a lot of times, and this is where Sovereign Wolf could have polished up the script a little bit to help this out. And I've got several places in the book where I can point this out. And not only that, because I hate when people say there's problems but don't tell you what you can do to fix it, I'm going to show you what I would do to fix them. And for that reason, there's some spoilers here specifically. So for the audience to get your feel of your story and the plot that's happening, you have to dramatize things rather than use words to tell the audience about them. And like I said, basically this is showing, not telling. I think comics are the ultimate storytelling device and tool because it really makes the reader use both sides of the brain, left and right hemispheres, kind of combining words and pictures. For that reason, things sink in awesomely when you do it right. So it's just a great format for humans, and showing the drama and the backstories can really help. But at the same time, when you show and not tell, it takes a lot of pages to do that. It's expensive as far as creating books go. And I think the best thing we could do is focus on the key points. And I think the focus part is the problem with Sovereign Wolf. So in Sovereign's case, the big problem is not showing the grandfather before we see him die. I believe that in Sovereign Wolf, we needed a scene or a flashback or just even a few panels that show the true connection of John and his grandfather before the tragedy happens. What's missing is one tightly written scene that would either show maybe a mysterious nature between John and the relationship with his grandfather, or showing the Native American connections to their heritage, or more importantly, probably just showing why they care for each other. And seeing those things would make us care for the grandfather. And I only bring up the grandfathers because the book uses the grandfather. And if you're going to use the grandfather in the plot, you better put a reason why we should care for him in the first place. So when you see him die in, the first something like 10 pages, you're immediately confused. And it's not out of shock. It's not out of the reason why the book wants you to be confused. Like, why is he being killed? We're confused because, one, you don't know who the hell this guy is until John says so in a caption. But two, there's not really a point to killing the grandfather in front of him in the first place. There's the antagonist, shows his grandfather being killed in front of him almost for like a coincidence, for almost like fright's sake. And so that's the best thing I can derive from this, is that the book is written for the scene to just scare you and not necessarily to tie into something that would make the audience care about it. So there are two other examples of showing, not telling in this book, and I won't get into them as deep as I am with the grandfather, but it's similar things. And those are with the rat experiments in the very beginning. I think this ties to another thing as well about John's tone and how his dialogue is written. But we could really see him, prove that he's smart and a scientist as an intern if we saw him actually do the rat experiments instead of talking about it. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But also Eva's introduction toward the end of the book could have been, I guess, cured and made more whole by introducing her as a side character in the beginning as well. Like I said, all this takes up expensive page space, so I get why they didn't do it, but at the same time, it would have made this book jump to the next level. So anytime a main character gets a simple mention as like their introduction instead of a full dramatization of it, you're gonna get this kind of surface level feeling about it. It's not gonna be satisfying for the reader. So that's the problem here. And I think there's like cheap and easy ways that he could, when I say he, I mean Eddie, could have introduced these characters instead of using a whole scene. There's something that Scott McCloud uses and talks about in his instructional books for comics, which is combining words and pictures in a repetitive way. It's like almost a redundant way where the words in your caption say exactly what is in the panel. What you can do is flip that and show the caption, say something like something about the grandfather, but also show exactly what is being said. And you can mix moods. So in some scenario with the grandfather, you could have him just show an image of him around a campfire being spiritual, maybe with John next to him, or something like that, instead of just talking about it in dialogue. By showing that, you're going to show at least a cheap version of the dramatization that I'm looking for. So as we go into the next stage, or the next section of the story analysis, it deals with this same grandfather problem. And the issue here is this odd ploy that the antagonist has. With the grandfather, we see him die right in front of John, and John gets captured. And again, this is all spoilers, but it starts getting convoluted here. But at the same time, it's also my favorite scene because of the acting. So John's captured and is brought in front of the villains. It's a very big punchy intro here that I really love. The villains kind of trick John for seemingly no reason here. They make mock this shape-shifting dude transform into his grandfather and somehow just trick him into him not really seeing his grandfather die, but there's no reason to do that. I don't see the reason why an antagonist would do that if they weren't trying to get information out of John. The only thing I can kind of think on is and come up with is that maybe they didn't want John to have a heart attack immediately upon waking and you know, seeing he's in a totally different situation and wondering if all that was real or something he could comprehend. But I guess here it's just another shock value thing, and I think that's superficial. So it's just a superficial way to get people to like plot. It's just plot for plot's sake, and I'm not really a fan of that. So there really needs to be a reason why the villain here, Emerald, is manipulating the situation. So this also ties into something else, which is like also a show not tell thing, where if you're going to make the grandfather a big part of the story like they do here to kind of trick the reader, we need to understand more about the character. Otherwise we won't care. It won't really fall with great, I guess, impact for the audience. So, but Eddie does do a great job at other things here. He does things like he makes the mysterious disappearances in the beginning of his hometown really believable by having like a conversation about something that you would have with your friend, and it's a very believable conversation about how is this even happening? Do you believe it's happening? With all these mysterious kind of disappearances. And I think he also makes the villains like really powerful and something that the audience is scared of. Like you're very much scared of these villains because they're so powerful and they get to do whatever they want. You get the sense that there's no way out of the situation John's in, which is great. Good job, Eddie. So One of the next things we want to talk about is the surface level characterization, which I think it's really just tone of voice, I think, with dialogue and some of the world building. But for the most part, I think characters and the world feel really genuine, and I want that to come across. I think that there's a lot of acting that is fantastic. Like, some of my favorite scenes are just reactions that John is having to the situations he's in. It's like, it's next level stuff. I love it. However, the biggest example of this surface level characterization, I think, is John Sovereign as a scientist. And like I said before, with the rats, I think his explanation of what he's doing with the rats in the beginning is a little too bro-y. It's like bro science to me. He's like explaining it to his bro friend, but at the same time, I don't know, give him some glasses, or at least use the dialogue to express that he's super smart without him saying, I'm super smart. You know what I mean? So I think there is a simplification, which is great for audiences, because like, you don't have to read through a bunch of jargon, but I think it's simplified too much, and he could have come across a little smarter, and I think it's a little bit more believable that they picked him, I guess, for this position, because he wouldn't go to like an internship without it actually being legit, because he's actually a real scientist, right? So something smarter sounding dialogue that doesn't match up with all the other, his bro friend or the security guard that has a fight with him. I think there's this very kind of superficial feeling to that. And that's what I mean by surface level characterization. So I think the acting and this like characterization is the best and worst parts of the book. Like I said, I love the reactions in a lot of places, but at the same time, I don't really love some of the other, I guess, similar tone between dialogue. So let's move on to the high points of the book, which are the action and how that's told told through visuals, and I think it's what we call the fun and games in Save the Cat. The book Save the Cat would characterize the best part of Sovereign Wolf as the fun and games, which is it delivering on the promise and the pitch, which is these crazy fights between shape-shifting humans that turn into animals, and these transformations are off the chain. I think the storytelling, as far as the fights go, compositions are great. It's all great. These things are so good. I love the insect transformation. The insect guy is great. I dig that a lot. But I think we're going to move to something that's probably one of the second worst part of what I read, and that's this debate sequence that kind of didn't work. And I'll tell you why it didn't work for me. It's essentially, this book ends at the end of Act 1 for, I guess, the global arc that he's trying to tell. And I think it's pretty cool because Eddie is respecting the formula, I believe, here. But the problem is that I think the debate section of storytelling, this is when the protagonist finds out that he's chosen or something, or he's special in some way. But at the same time, he has to come to terms with it. So there's a period in time which they call the debate sequence, which he's debating, should I be this hero or should I not, and how do I cope? And in Sovereign Wolf, this doesn't really happen. It's done within a page, within a few panels, and it doesn't seem believable. It seems rushed. I think adding a few more pages here would bring this story to the next level. So again, we need to show and not tell. There's a lot of dialogue in the last few pages talking about this debate sequence that he goes through. But I feel like with storytelling, the best part is exaggeration and dramatization. And what we're missing here is that visual part of it, where in real life, if you're debating to do something, you might think to yourself in your head or talk to somebody about it. But in a story, we need to see that it actually is happening physically. Like John needs to run through a hallway at breakneck speed because he doesn't want to be around these people. He doesn't know what's going on, even though he's just saved, by the protagonist team. he doesn't know what's going on. He needs to figure this out in a physical form. He needs to punch somebody in the face for no reason just because he's confused. He needs to figure it out in a physical way, because this is a visual medium, and so that's what's missing here. So him coping with everything is kind of tough, and I think it's not laid out that great. And because we're meeting all these new characters for the first time, and we're kind of confused ourselves as readers, it doesn't help. It doesn't help tie it all together. And I think if this debate sequence was in the story, it would bring it up to the next level. And I think this almost even surpasses the grandfather, but maybe they're tied in my mind now. But if you add those sequences of introductions to characters and add on the debate sequence at the end of this book, I would jump this book's story and storytelling from A to probably S, and really say it's out of this world. Also, I want to bring up a couple storytelling issues visually. There's a couple pages where there's a storytelling point, a focal point on the story that is pushed to the bottom, pushed to a really small panel, and it's essentially eclipsed by the bombastic fight scene. So the artist chose to show, I guess, the polish and the bombastic nature of the fight instead of showing the story point. And I think that's a mistake. I think the story point is what ties the whole reason for showing the fight in the first place. So with all that being said, I want to rate the storytelling and the story as a B tier. All right, so here's just the bullet points for Sovereign Wolf's review. The categories are presentation, art, and storytelling. Storytelling is combination between the visual side and the writing side and how they combine. So within these three categories, for presentation, I give it an S tier, and that is for its premier, sleek, high gloss, blockbuster package that you get here. This is the bar that everyone should be striving toward with their books. For art, I give Sovereign Wolf an A. This is for a great consistency of a realism and a tone with the colors that really sells the book as this blockbuster main event. And with the exceptions of a few faces and a little bit of inconsistencies, we'll say, on that side of draftsmanship, this thing is pretty much exactly what you want to see in a book. For story, I give Sovereign Wolf a B. And this is because even though Sovereign Wolf's story is really great, it's got great pacing, it is so enjoyable, the action's great, and the acting is great, especially. I feel like the missing pieces of character introductions, the times when the book tells you things and not shows you things, and the debate sequence that is really rushed, I think really makes some of the story feel superficial. And because of that, the score is reflected a little lower. All right, now for the final score, everybody. Compiling it all together, just feels like this book is great. It can be improved upon, but I'm giving it an A- out of B through S tiers. But yeah, it's a great book. I suggest everyone go read it. And if you like this review, if you like the channel, please like and subscribe. Also, check out Star Circuit on Indiegogo. It's a cyberpunk racing book that I've put all my time and energy into. It's fulfilling very soon, so please go support that if you like my work. I'll see you guys next time.
Welcome to the future. A place where you can find anything you desire. If the burner gangs don't find you first. Where the fastest racers are artificial. And if you're human, stand a chance. Star Circuit.